Hello and welcome back to the course on Python programming. Today I've got a very exciting tutorial prepared for you. We're talking about the while loop. So let's dive straight into it. I've got a new Jupyter notebook opened. Let's give this one a name. This one's going to be the while loop. So go ahead and create one of these as well so we can follow along with the code. As you can see here, I've already removed the toolbar because we don't need it. We're going to be using shortcuts and we need to save some space. And if we really need to, we can also remove this top header as well. All right, so what is the while loop and what is it used for? So first thing I wanted to mention that if you're taking this course for learning Python for data science and data analytics, then chances are that you've heard about the R programming language. Maybe you've even taken my course on R programming. So here I wanted to mention that there's a difference between Python and R. There are actually many differences, even though both tools can be used for data science. There are many differences, and one of them is that Python is not a vectorized programming language. So R is a vectorized programming language, and a lot of the operations there, all of the analytics and data mining and visualization, a lot of things are done through a vectorized approach. And that is a great advantage of the R programming language, and it allows you to avoid creating loops all the time. So you can use the apply family of functions, and you can just work with vectors throughout the whole programming language of R, and most of the times you'll be able to avoid working with loops. Whereas Python is an object-oriented programming language, and unfortunately you can't have best of both worlds. You have to, it's like a trade-off, and you have to choose one or the other, either vectorized or object-oriented. And therefore in Python, you don't have that luxury of working with vectors, although you do have lots of other advantages, which we'll see throughout this course. But at the same time, you don't have that advantage of working with vectors, and therefore you'll find yourself working or creating loops more often than you would in R. So therefore, this tutorial is very important to understand the basis of what loops are. This is going to be our first loop, the while loop. Then we'll look at other loops throughout this course. But at the same time, this tutorial is important, and we're going to look at the while loop now, and I'll show you how it works in Python. So it's important to get your head around it to understand the concept of loops. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate what a while loop would normally look in a programming language. So we're talking like languages like R or C, C++, or even Java. So, you know, all the standard, more common programming languages. So let's have a look at this. Normally you would see a while loop look like this. So while, then normal brackets, then here, and then curly braces. Inside the normal brackets, you would have a condition. And then inside the curly braces, you would have executable code. Executable code line 1, and then you would have line 2, line 3. All right, so this is how it would look like in other programming languages. And before we move on to how it looks like in Python, let's try to understand what this construction does. So what this construction does is once it is executed, this condition is checked. So Python, or the programming language, will check this condition, and then it will go through the curly braces and execute all of the code here if the condition is true. Then once the execution is complete, what will happen is if you have more code here, let's say executable code 4, what will happen is Python won't, or the programming language won't move forward to the next executable code. It will actually go back to the start of this block, and it will check the condition again. If the condition is true again, it will execute this code. And then once it gets to this curly bracket, it will come back again, it will check the condition. So that's what's going to keep happening. The programming language will keep coming back, checking the condition, executing the code, checking the condition, executing the code, checking the condition, executing the code. And that will keep going. And that's why it's called a loop. And as soon as the condition becomes false, or whenever it finds that the condition is false, it will not execute the code. It will proceed to further lines of code which follow. So that is how a while loop works. Now let's have a look at how the while loop is structured in Python. In Python, a while loop is structured differently. The reason behind it is because that is one of the ideas of Python, to make everything super simple, to make everything very legible, to make the code look very aesthetic. So this is what it looks like in Python: while condition, colon, and no curly braces. So no normal braces, no curly braces, just a colon after the condition. And the question here is, how does Python know when our while loop ends, where the body of the while loop ends? How does it distinguish between this executable code 4 and executable code 3, 2, and 1? So let's say the condition is true, so Python will execute this line, this line, this line, then it'll go back and check the condition, and then it'll execute these lines again. how does it know where to stop? There's no curly braces, right? So this is very interesting thing, and a lot of the times when programmers just start using Python, they get very surprised by this. And the reason that Python does know is because of these tabulations, or because of these indentations. And this is where we come to the concept, which is very unique for Python among programming languages, that tabulation, or the proper term here is indentation, is important. Indentation is a part of the syntaxes of this programming language. So very important to understand that if I, for instance, remove the indentation here, then the body of the while loop has been reduced to just these 2 lines of code. So that is why it's important to observe indentation and to maintain it properly as per your code. Whereas in other programming languages, it doesn't matter. You could put more indentation, you could put less indentation. As long as the curly braces are there, everything makes sense. In Python, there's no curly braces. This is one of those situations. So it's important to observe indentation. All right, so hopefully all that makes sense. I know it might be very new if this is your first time working with Python, but we'll get used to it as we go through the code. Let's look at an example. All right, so I'm going to remove this template, and here we'll just look at our first while loop. We'll say while false, colon, and you can see as soon as I put the colon and press enter, the indentation is set there for me by Jupyter. So now I'm going to say print and hello. And what will happen is Python will check this condition. Because it's false, it won't even go inside the loop. So basically, as soon as I run this, nothing will happen. As you can see, nothing happened there. Now, if I take the opposite loop, if I say true, what we've created here is effectively an infinite loop. If I run this line, what will happen is Python will check this condition, it's true, it'll print the hello. Then it'll check the condition, it's true, it'll print hello. And so it'll keep doing that, and it'll actually get stuck. So let's go ahead and just for interest's sake, let's run this and see what happens. So you can see we've got all these hellos, you can see it's running. If you look up here, you see it's busy, right? So your tab is busy, your browser is probably hung. I can't even scroll here, I can't do anything. So basically it just keeps running. So one way to stop it is to press 00 on your machine or on your keyboard. That should stop it. Actually, as you can see, there we go. So I was able to restart the kernel. That's by pressing 00. Hopefully this will work. This is always a mess, so try to avoid creating infinite loops. All right, I'm going to kind of like scroll down. Well, there's no point in scrolling down because there's so many of them. So I'm just going to get rid of this cell. In fact, the best way I found is to just refresh this page. That's the beauty of working in a browser on your local machine. So hopefully that will bring us something up. All right, so there we go. Let's just try and now get rid of this line. So there we go. We got rid of that line, and always a bad idea to run infinite loops. Let's try create a proper loop that actually makes sense. So let's say while, let's create a counter, a variable called counter, and let's say equals 0. And then we'll say while counter is less than 12, colon, and then we'll print the value of counter. Then we'll say counter equals counter plus 1. So what's going on here? We've got a variable called counter, which starts at 0. By the way, indexation in Python starts at 0, so it's also a good idea to start your counters at 0. That's another difference to the R programming language, where indexation starts at 1. So here we've got while counter is less than 12. We want to print the value of this variable, and at the same time we want to increase this variable by 1. So we take its current value plus 1, and then we put it into that same variable. And so basically the program or Python will come here, we'll see that counter is 0 is less than 12, correct, it'll execute this code. Then counter has already become 1, 1 is still less than 12, it'll execute this code, and it'll keep doing that until counter becomes 12. 12 is not less than 12, it'll stop. So let's have a look at that. I'll press Shift Enter. As you can see, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 11. Okay, so that is how our while loop works. You can experiment with that. You can change the value of counter or this condition and maybe put other parameters inside the while loop. So I can show you an example that works with indentation. So if here I say print hello, you'll see that hello will only get printed once. If I run that, you'll see 0 up to 11, and then it prints hello, because first thing is counter gets its value, then this loop is executed many times, and then once that is done, then only hello is printed. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. Have a play around with that to try creating your own loops and experiment with while, and I'll look forward to you next time. Until then, happy coding!